Your life's ambition is really simply making your livelihood something that you actually do love doing. But you need a practical way to go about it.
Civilization is in the following mode. This is what we need to break.
This is a whole different paradigm completely. We have a constitution that's called the prime law. There's no leaders, no political class. It's all mutual value exchange.
Find what you love.
Welcome to today's podcast. I'm here with Mark Hamilton, my father, and today I want to address a sentiment that is becoming more and more common today, especially with young people. How or what does somebody do if they're stuck in a rut and don't see a way out? If they're not living the life they once thought they would live, void of, purpose or passion, something that their younger selves would be ashamed of if they saw how their life turned out today?
Great question, and I hear that a lot too, Wallace. Let's start with, just for a minute, you hear this so much today about kids who graduate, or I should say young men and women who graduate from college, and they're out there in the real world. They can't get a job that even has anything to do with their field of knowledge that they learned in college. It's very underwhelming, the job they finally do get, and it doesn't make the money. They're living in an apartment. The life they had hoped for just doesn't happen, and they don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. That's very common, right? And then you have your middle-aged people who, a lot of them are in that same boat these days. The economy's not great. Inflation is through the roof. So what do you do? Well, a lot of success gurus will tell you, find what you love. How many times have you heard that, Wally? Find what you love and everything will be great. Well, there's some problems in that. First of all, if you even can find what you really love, usually it's just impractical to actually pursue it. Hey, I want to be a world-class ice skater. Well, how do you do that? I want to be a successful multimillionaire with women hanging off my arms. It's impractical. It just doesn't happen easily. What I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is just run through a real practical approach here to finding what you love, down deep, what you really love, and how to practically go about implementing that. Because what I want you to do, what I want your listeners to do, is to discover and live their life's ambition. You know what that life ambition is, Wally?
Tell me.
Should I be calling you Wallace or Wally?
Wallace.
Okay, sorry. Okay, Wallace. Your life's ambition is really simply making your livelihood something that you actually do love doing. But you need a practical way to go about it. That's what I want to do today. So let's start off with first finding out what you love doing. And then we're going to make it very practical, step-by-step procedure to turn that into your livelihood. Okay? You with me?
Let's do it.
All right. So our right brain, a lot of people call it subconscious, or the creative side, the emotional side, the side of the brain that absorbs information everywhere, but you're not even aware of it. Then you have your left brain, which is the aware, the logical side of your brain, where you function day to day. Well, through your life, your right brain will be sending your left brain messages if you learn to pay attention to the right brain, to those messages. And they usually come through in emotions. My favorite thing to do is when I wake up in the morning, before I let anything get in my head, before I think about my business, before I think about my family, before I think about any problems, I just let my left aware brain just be blank and just pay attention to any feelings that come my way. Because those are messages from your right brain trying to tell you something. Now, throughout your life, you'll feel these emotions about something that you're drawn to. And if you pay attention to them, oftentimes you will hear those messages. But if you can't find those messages the way I just described, through paying attention, which I'm very good at now, and listening to what my right brain is trying to send over to my left brain. My unaware, my subconscious, we'll call it, sending over to my aware left brain before it gets too cluttered with the day's work.
Ever since you posted that in the Ascension community, I never knew about that technique. So but ever since you posted that, I've been implementing that, and every morning when I wake up, I do that, and it's crazy how that actually works.
Yes.
And I'm kind of a little shocked you didn't share that with me before.
I wish. That's why I love Ascension. This is our community, right? These are people who have read my books, and they're growing with us. We share everything, and these things that I've known that I've never actually expressed, even not in my books, quite. And I have thousands of pages of books that I've written over the past 45 years. Some things don't get in those books. And this beautiful Ascension community full of beautiful people who are our readers, we get to share these golden nuggets with them that they may have not read, even if they've been a reader of mine for decades. And so, yes, and I apologize to everyone for not having expressed this, but this is a very real technique that I use every morning of my life, and it has guided me to the success that I've experienced. And tell me a little bit about your recent experiences with this.
Yeah, first of all, I was surprised I actually remembered this in the morning when I woke up, but I've been getting more used to doing it. It's had quite an interesting impact on my life recently. When I wake up in the morning, I know throughout reading all your works and, just talking to you on a day-to-day basis.
Read several times, I know that.
Yeah, every day, an hour each day.
Yeah.
But all you discuss and you tell me about, you trusting your right brain and almost like talking to your right brain. And before I didn't fully understand, I guess, what that meant, because I haven't really done that. I've learned to trust my gut, I would say, more.
Yes.
After, and that's kind of what I thought it was. But now I know, like, you can actually talk to your right brain, and you can allow that two-way communication, so to speak, right in the morning, right when you wake up. And so that's crazy, because now when I'm thinking about big projects that I'm working on, and I need like the breakthroughs to, get to the next level and to complete the next piece and put the pieces into place and, all the big things we're working on, in the morning, that technique kind of just shows me the answer a lot of times and gives me that feeling of what I need to do next, gives me that nice big breakthrough. And if I have a big decision, that tells me in the morning, just like how that technique shows me when I have a big decision, kind of the answer. Obviously, later throughout the day, you have to analyze that with your left brain. But in the morning, the right brain is like almost always correct.
And that's that eureka, right? That's that aha moment that it gives you. And that has been, well, if we go back to the bicameral civilization, it was the right brain that wide-reaching data that would send the message over through an audio hallucination, a voice of the God, to tell the left brain what to do. So if you become really adept at doing this, you can let your right brain tell you what to do. Yes, you need to analyze it later with your logical left brain, but it's a very powerful technique to listen to your right brain. And Wallace, that's one very powerful approach. Another thing to pay attention to, and what we're doing, remember, is we're trying to figure out here what it is we really love down deep, what we really love doing. Another technique that your right brain is communicating to your left brain is what you tend to be drawn to reading. Reading is largely a left and right brain activity. You're absorbing knowledge. A lot of it's going in the right brain, and you're analyzing some of it with your left brain. But when you are just drawn, you don't even know why. I'm drawn in it. This one fellow I knew just loved opening Popular Mechanics, the magazine, and he would always read the scientific stories. Well, his job had nothing to do with anything scientific, but he was underneath it all. That's what was his right brain telling him, man, I would love to work in a mechanical field or an engineering field or a scientific field. That was his right brain. I knew that. I knew that was what was going on. So things that you're attracted to, drawn to reading. Another thing you can look for to try to discover what you really love is look back over your past and look at things that you've done throughout your past that you really love, but you chalked them off as impractical other than maybe a hobby. Maybe a hobby. Now, from reading my books, I've come up with an expression I call your Friday night essence. Right? You want to just tell me for a second what the Friday night essence is? Because I know you know that very well.
Yeah, I love that term. Basically, it's just on a Friday night, that is the time where most people shut off. And, growing up in school, Friday, when you get home from school on Friday, your weekend is free and you can do whatever you want. People now on working Friday, when they come home in the evening, they can do whatever they want to do. They're free from work, from the burden of life. And so on a Friday night, if they choose whatever they choose to do on a Friday night, that brings them some enjoyment or happiness. So if there's anything productive that you can do on a Friday night when your brain is supposed to shut off, then that is something that you can do and brings you joy. And so that is your Friday night essence, what you were meant to do.
Absolutely. If you find yourself in the past doing something that you would do, and it doesn't have to be on Friday night, but we use that because, like you said, that's a shut down and tune out night. But if you're doing something productive, I don't mean passive entertainment like watching a movie or maybe watching a sporting event. I'm talking about something that you're doing on your shut down, tune out night that is a productive activity. Man, you've discovered what your right brain is telling you right there. This is who I am. This is who I want to be. This is what I love doing. Because why else would you be doing that on a Friday night, right? I write in my books that Henry Ford would love, when he was a teenager, he would love to take apart engines and put them back together again. That's something he'd love doing on a Friday night, right? What I would love doing on Friday night is write. I love write. I've done it many, many times. I don't have to be out, with friends or out partying when I was younger. I could be sitting at my desk and just be so happy just writing. And that's my Friday night essence. So when you find your Friday night essence, you found something very precious. And you may not realize it, but you found something very precious. Because what you found is what underneath it all, something that you would really love doing, your life's ambition. You would love to make that your livelihood. You would love to not have to go to work, clock in, work a 9 to 5, come home, and then on a Friday night, that's, remember the graph in my book where that's the I forget now what I call it. What do you call it? The weekend period and the Friday night? What do I call that?
Yeah, the weekday is the burden.
Right.
And then it's the enjoyment.
Enjoyment or something like that, yeah. So, but you're doing that during that enjoyment phase, right? On a Friday night. So you've discovered something very precious. Now, people say, well, yeah, but what do they do with that? They just lock it away in the impractical section of their mind. Or, as we started off this conversation, they listen to success gurus and they say, find what you love, man. Find what you love. Okay, so they find what they love, but then goes into the impractical section. I can never make money. I can never make my living doing this. Maybe I can do it as a hobby. So what I'm going to give your listeners today, is actually a practical way to go after what it is you love, your Friday night essence, and turn it into your livelihood. You ready?
Yeah, I know a lot of people.
Okay.
Who would love this.
And it's just such a coincidence. Today, I actually, on my daily motivation in Ascension, I wrote how to do this. Abbreviated version of what I'm going to tell you right now. But our ascenders now are all enjoying this technique right now. So let me give it to your listeners here. So there's something you really love doing, but it's impractical. There's no way I can make money. Fine. Let me now move over for a second to something you've read about in my books called the ultimate time management program of all time. The best in the history ever is the Many-Day Power Thinking Team. You know about that. Can you just before I move on, can you just break down for our listeners what the Many-Day is?
Well, that's about like 100 pages in your book.
Right.
So let's see if I can break this down quickly. Well, like you said, it absolutely is the greatest productivity time management technique ever invented. I've tried pretty much as many, probably all of them.
You're very well read in the business books. You read dozens of books. You're an avid reader. You do the speed reading, the Jim Quick type of reading where you just fly through books. You've read dozens of business books, so you're a testament to the Many-Day schedule.
Yeah. And so basically the Many-Day is when you break your tasks down into physical movements, where like mental movements, going back to you kind of got this idea from the assembly line, which was during the Great Industrial Revolution, and which was the greatest productivity boost since the division of labor. And so going down, talking about the assembly line, when like a carriage would pull an automobile down of the Ford factory, you'd have just one man on the rivets, and all day he'd just go rivet after rivet, drilling them in. He'd just have one physical movement, one task, and then you have another guy, put in the steering wheel, or, another guy doing the sewing, putting in the seats, and then putting on the wheels, another person. And so each movement was broken down into its own unit, I guess I would say, to make all excess time, all excess waste has been eliminated. And so instead of, making 1 to 2 automobiles a day with the assembly line, he made, dozens a day.
Right. And overnight, when they started the first moving assembly line, this is just the very early version of his assembly line. Of course, it got better and better as he worked on it. 8-fold increase overnight. 8-fold. So when I studied a lot of time management back in the 80s, I studied a lot of time management programs, and I was exhausted trying to find 1 extra hour a day. 1 extra hour. The discipline just was not worth it. But with the Many-Day, like you said, breaking it down in these physical movements, overnight I gained 8-fold my productivity. So instead of gaining 1 extra hour a day, I gained, let's just say if I worked an 8-hour day, but my efficiency went up 8-fold, that would be, what's 8 times 8? 64. Okay. So I would get 64 hours a day. And I really did. When you go in my books and read it, you see I really got that efficiency. And then I introduced the power thinking to that. And the power thinking, now that you can move through things so quickly, you can just think of these projects way out in the future, and you could just yank them down into quick action reality because of the Many-Day schedule. So it's just an amazing thrust forward that just skyrocketed me and the publishing company, the dissemination of our books. And so anyway, that was a good description, Wallace, of the Many-Day schedule. Was there anything else you needed to add to that?
Yeah, just briefly, you would break your down into physical movements based on, the time allotted for, the different tasks or movements that you have. And then, and so each block would basically be its own day, its own Many-Day.
Yes.
And so once you reach, let's say like you have from 8 to 10 is your creativity Many-Day, or, your writing Many-Day, then as soon as it hits 10, then you're done for the day. You cannot move back onto it. And so those deadline pressures really increase the intensity, the effectiveness. So you add, those deadline pressures, which make you get so much more done, because as soon as it hits 10:01, you cannot work on it for another 22 hours, basically.
And just think, for the younger generation, the way you can relate to this is, remember cramming for final exams, right? That you are just the most learned, productive students during that cramming for a final exam than you were for the entire year. That's just the way it is. So yes, those deadline pressures really work. So I would think that every super achiever was on some form of the mini-day schedule. Now, here's what I want you to do. And here is how we are going to take this ambiguous or this impractical thing that I love. Any success guru, find what you love. Okay, I found it. But now what? There's nothing I can do about it. So you just kind of give up on it. We're not going to give up on it. We're going to go get that sucker. And here's how you do it. You're going to look at your Friday night essence once you figure out what you love to do. Once you figure out that Friday night essence. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at that and you're going to do exactly what you just described about the many days. You're going to say, if I were to make this happen, if I were to do this right now, if this were my job, if this were my livelihood, I'm going to break this down into its many days. Because any and everything can be broken down into many days. Why? Because everything in life is a movement. From the moment you open your eyes in the morning to the moment you close your eyes to sleep, throughout your whole day, everything is motion. Everything is a movement. So you can break anything you do down into its movements, its physical movements. And that also, by the way, in this day of computer age and all, you know, when I wrote the many days before, there was really, computers were really that big of a deal. So it was more physical tasks like phone calls, letter writing, things like that. Now everything's on the computer. So it's also using sort of physical parts of your brain as well. Right. And you're going to, from what I understand, you're going to update my many day power thinking team to bring in sort of the digital world, the modern age, which is your generation, which will be fantastic. But we're going to look at our Friday night essence. Now, I'm going to use an actual person throughout history right here, right now, because it's a great example. I use it in my book to show you someone who did exactly this. And it's one of my favorite authors. His name is Jack London. He wrote The Call of the Wild. He wrote The Sea Wolf, one of my favorite books of all time, The Sea Wolf. He wrote Martin Eden, another favorite of mine, which is semi-autobiographical novel of Jack London himself. Jack London is sort of Martin Eden. So Jack London was poor in Oakland, uneducated. He dropped out of school. I don't even think he went to high school. Eventually went back and got his education, but I don't have the facts right off the top of my head, but I think he fell out of school early on, maybe 8th grade. Don't hold me to that, but it was something to that effect. He worked in factories. He worked in a canning factory for 14 to 16 hours a day. And he was just I think he was 14 years old at the time. He's just a kid. But he had this crazy dream. He's illiterate. He eventually became a pirate, an oyster pirate, where they would actually steal people's oysters. It was this actual thing in Oakland back in the day. And he was a dock breed. He was illiterate. But he had this dream. He had this dream of becoming this literate, almost a poetic writer. And now, look, talk about the impractical section. Think about that. A poor, illiterate kid in Oakland dreaming to be a professional writer. I mean, the odds against that are millions to one. They're just astronomical, right? So it's just like he could go to a success guru and he would say, yeah, Jack, I want you to think of what you love. Oh, I want to be a writer. Okay, Jack, be a writer. Well, how is that going to happen? It's not going to happen. But Jack London used my, and I should say his, because he was born before me, many-day schedule without realizing that's what he's doing. Remember I said earlier, all super achievers in one form or another have used the many-day schedule because it's just they find their way to rise to that level. They find their way to the most effective approach to their time. And so they find this, and Jack London found this. He took his Friday night essence, this dream, this love that was so impractical. And he said, well, he didn't say it in these words, but he broke it down into many days, into physical movements. And he put those many days around his routine physical rut, what I call his income many day. So he placed it in the morning and the evenings, and on the weekends, and to get a feel for this, if you read Martin Eden, one of my most enjoyable books I've ever read, and you see Martin Eden as Jack London, you'll get a real good idea of what Jack London did and what he went through. But he developed basically 4 mini days. He developed reading. He realized to become a writer, he needed to be a heavy reader. So he set up a reading mini day. He set up an intense grammar study mini day. Now, back then, they had no electronics, so he would go to the public library for hours and study books on grammar. Then he developed a writing mini day, which his initial writings were terrible, but he worked and developed and worked and developed to the point where his writings became, his prose was, in many cases, practically poetic. And then he had a self-education at the library. Self-education, just in general. And then you could conceivably say he had yet another mini day, but I think it kind of blends in with the self-education, and I call that research mini day. So he had these 4 or 5 mini days that he worked around his incredible stagnant rut in a canning factory, or as a working on the delivery docks, or as a pirate, or oyster pirate. And he was very disciplined and dedicated to those mini days. And here's what happened. It started to, he could see it in his writings. These were his metrics. He could see his writing going from real junk to interesting to pretty darn interesting. So he started sending it away to publishers. And he'd send out hundreds to publishers. And then one came back, published his work. Short story. And Jack London became the king of short stories. As Jack London rose from his incredibly boring, stagnant routine rut to where he actually began making money and was able to support himself through writing. I mean, just imagine the transformation that he went through emotionally inside. And what did that do to him? Where did all of his energy go? All of his passion go? Where did it go? Where did it go, Wallace? He poured it in to his writing. He fell in love with what he was doing. He didn't just love it. He fell in love with it. And that's all he wanted to do, Wallace. Day and night. Because now he didn't have to go to the cannery or go unload boats on the docks. He could sit at his desk and he could write and send this off to publishers, and he could support himself. And this brought about something that I call downstream focus. This is the key to breaking free of the following mode, breaking free of the stagnant routine rut. And how do you get there? Not by saying, find what you love and pursue it. That just goes in the impractical section. But it's the many days and placing them around, disciplining yourself, placing them around and staying true to those around your income many day, that routine rut that you don't want to spend the rest of your life in that routine rut. But you are going to if you don't use this very practical technique I lay out for you in my books and that I'm laying out to your readers, to your listeners right now. This is the way to do it. This is the practical way to do it. And Wallace, since I've been talking a long time, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about downstream focus as opposed to the upstream battle that you get with, look, not to put anybody down, but when you go to other success gurus and you hear do what you love, well, it's a big upstream battle to ever get there. So you're psyched while you're there, but then when you go home, what really happens? You stay excited for a week, 2 weeks, but what happens on the third and fourth week? It just kind of goes away, right? And that's exactly, Wallace, and that's because it's an upstream battle you're fighting. It's like in the old days trying to stick to the discipline techniques to get that 1 extra hour a day. It just wasn't worth it. Well, that's the same thing here. You got to follow your heart, do what you love, and then you go home and you do this. It's all an upstream battle. But I've discovered how to make it a downstream focus, not an upstream focus. And Wallace, I want to turn it over to you. Tell me about downstream focus, because I know you're on it because I see you every day doing this.
Downstream focus, pretty much that's kind of like what you were talking about, your Friday night essence. When you're in your Friday night essence doing something you enjoy doing, then the difficulty of doing those things in the area that you love is easy. It's like swimming downstream on a river, as opposed to swimming upstream, which is way more difficult. Like if you're trying to pursue a career in something you actually don't like doing, you're going to have so much resistance, so much headwind. And those who actually enjoy doing it are just going to go downstream and swim right by you and get much farther along. And so finding your downstream focus, it's pretty crucial if you want to be successful in the area that you choose. And so I guess if you're kind of like what we were just talking about, if you are not in something that you enjoy doing, it would be better to find a way to enter something within your Friday night essence where you have that downstream focus. I guess on the flip side of that, putting things into context, not just saying one way is right. I do believe at a certain point there is, like, sometimes you got to have that upstream battle to be able to get to, doing something that you enjoy doing. Sometimes you got to do the hard things first to be able to get to the things that you enjoy more.
That's very true. And that's all part of even part of your Friday night essence. But I'm going to make a statement here that I want all of our listeners to always be aware of. And that is, the world is a competitive place. It's competitive. When you are competing in this world, you have to have that downstream focus so you can just glide right past everyone else who's really, struggling to do the swim. You need to pass by your competitors, and you will if you are on your Friday night essence, flying and using my tools. We just talked about the mini day. We haven't even talked about the power thinking, and we're not really going to talk about that today. I'm just trying to give our listeners an approach to discover and get to what they really love doing, their life's ambition, the life they were meant to live. This is how you do it. And once you get there, then you go through all of my techniques here, because they're going to just send you right past all your competitors, right to the top. So
yeah, it is a competitive world.
It's a competitive world, buddy.
It's just reality of it.
It's the reality.
You don't have that downstream focus, someone will swim right by you,
right.
take what you want, and
it won't be you. So I'm giving you techniques to rise to the top. This is the beginning point. Our little podcast here today, this is the beginning. Discovering your Friday night essence is a beautiful self-discovery. Just the discovery of that alone will put you on a high for a month, because you, at least, and once you implement it for the rest of your life, Wallace, think about it. People go through their entire lives. Someone listening to us right now might be 60 years old and never knew about the Friday night essence. And here we're telling them how to find it, then how to implement it. The euphoria that you feel from discovering who you were meant to be. Looking back over your life, it's sometimes really hard to see that, and here's why. Because as we grow older from our youth, when we have these big dreams and we have this basic sense of how wonderful life can be, But we tend to lose that as we get stuck in our routine ruts when we enter the real world. We tend to lose that. And then what happens is we begin to accept that. And then what happens is we begin to just believe, well, this is just the way it is, and this is just how life is. And then the burden starts creeping in. You know how I talk about the burden of your life. And then, eventually you're fine with death. Life is not that great anymore at a certain point in your life, and the burden creeps in. But the love of your life, your Friday night essence, gets left behind, and you start resigning to this way of life, this burden. So I call it, the description, I say the falling leaves of resignation. Cover up what you really want it to be, what your life's ambition is. Your Friday night is to cover it up. And when you start looking back, you won't even see it. You won't even know what it is. You won't even know how to spot it. But these are how I opened the podcast today. These are some techniques to go about brushing those leaves off and finding your Friday night essence. And then the mini day, breaking it down and actually pulling yourself out of the rut into your Friday night essence like Jack London did, and just living the euphoria of downstream focus for the rest of your life. And then I can guarantee you something. As you get older, you're not going to be bored with life, and you're not going to want to die. And that is my ultimate goal in life, is to cure aging and death. I'll end it right there.
So just to sum everything up, we talked about how to kind of end that stagnation and unfulfillment and unhappiness and lack of passion, purpose, and the lack of a fire, light that's in a lot of people today. Majority of people today, they're not feeling that excitement out of life that they once dreamed about. And so we talked about the first thing we talked about was
finding what you love doing. And you can pay attention to your right brain in the mornings when you wake up, what it's telling you. You can find out, what have I been drawn to? What magazines or online have I been drawn to over my life? You can find just what activities you've done in evenings, like maybe on a Friday night. That's not just watching a baseball game or watching a movie or watching Netflix, but actually something productive that you do and that you kind of love doing it. You didn't have a problem being by yourself, not out with friends, and just doing this. These are all right brain messages to your left brain. This is what I love. This is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. And we also talked about that technique, the technique that all of you need to start implementing, where it's as soon as you wake up in the morning, you allow your right brain to talk to you and send you messages. How I do it is I think about, but it's different because in the morning you're not actually like thinking, you're still in that almost like dream state, purposefully staying in there. So I kind of just think of like, the project I have going on, the big decision I need to make. And then I don't say like, oh, what's the right answer? I just think about it, and then
you're just aware of it, basically. Yes, exactly. Without trying to analyze anything.
Mm-hmm. And then you will get those messages in your feelings, and throughout the day, it just carries you along. Yes. And then we talked about how to actually take that Friday night essence and bring it into reality rather than just some abstract, obscure thing. It's like, oh, let me do that thing, let me do what I love. It's like, no, how do you actually grab that dream, pull it down to reality, to today, and, start pursuing that to be successful in that area, which is through, the mini day system, which is outside your normal income mini day, which is your work hours. You block in the movements that you need to do to pursue your Friday night essence.
Exactly.
And then
what happens when it starts pulling you out, like Jack London, when he got that first check and then he got enough to where he didn't have to work anymore, his old routine rut. What happens then?
Right, and then at that point, you will be able to start slowly replacing that, spend more time on your Friday night essence mini days.
And what happens internally?
Oh, you start to feel good. You start to get that harmonious feeling that you are in harmony with yourself, with your essence, and with the universe.
And what does that change from an upstream fight in life to
downstream focus,
unbelievable,
where you have all the competitive advantages and you enjoy it. I mean,
and not only enjoy it, but you go after it with, I don't know, like with a vengeance. You know, this is what I love, man. I've missed out on this for the past 25 years of my life. Let me at it, man.
Yeah, it's beautiful to, I mean, I know I'm more fortunate than a lot of people just because I've had you to mentor me my whole life, and I'm absolutely living my Friday Night Essence and downstream focus. And like, you know, I work, I don't tell people I work. Like, I just tell people, like, you know, I have fun. I enjoy what I do. I can work 16-hour days easily, and to me,
and you do. And you know, Wallace, this brings up a good point. No matter what station you are in life, if you're living in the projects, if you're born into a wealthy family, this applies to everyone at their levels. You know, you can have very rich families where you have the children grow up suffering from depression, suicide. So this applies to them, finding their Friday Night Essence, and that's their life ambition. It applies to people who live in the worst neighborhoods and finding their Friday Night Essence. If you're born in the worst of neighborhoods, you can, well, Jack London right there, you know, he poor, and he goes to the library, the public library, and this is what he did to rise out and love his life. Whatever station you are in life, middle class, low class, upper class, this applies to everyone. Everyone's emotions inside come from finding what they love in life. That's where their happiness can come from, and creating values as a result. So everyone is after happiness, whether you're born here, 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 or here. But this is a way to find the path to create, to maximize creating values, to go from a bored 9-to-5 value producer, you know, going, clocking in, doing your routine rut, and shifting into a value creator where you're creating values that didn't exist before, and the euphoria that you feel by being a creator. Any station in life this applies to.
I mean, you're a testament. You grew up in trailer parks, and you grew up
bad neighborhoods, and so I pulled myself out of that situation, and I don't feel any loss in my life because of having gone through a pretty low period of poverty. I don't feel any loss, any negativity in my life. I just look back and go, wow, that was an interesting experience, and here's where I am today. And you're born into a better situation, but that doesn't change our emotional self. You achieve happiness through value creation. I achieved happiness through value creation. It all comes down to finding what you love and creating values as a result.
Creating values for society.
Yes.
And about the, you know, Friday Night Essence and finding your Friday Night Essence and pursuing it. It's also, you know, I live it and experience it. I see you all growing up, living in and experiencing it. And it's especially touching and emotional to me when, you know, a lot of our, or some of our members in Ascension, when we show them how to find their Friday Night Essence, and we show them how to actually pursue and achieve that. And it's just a huge life shift, emotional shift that I see in them, where they, like, something snaps in them, where they just are feeling so much more enjoyment out of life. They're so excited, and they're, you know, pursuing this. They're becoming value creators, and we're showing them how to, you know, create that path to where they're successful. And, you know,
Wallace, I have to tell you, Wallace, that is one of the greatest joys in my life, is to see our community see the success and just the expression in their faces and in their voices when we talk to them, we have our Zoom meetings with them. It's just extremely uplifting to me to see what we are able to bring to them. We're like a family, as you know.
Yeah, and yeah, it's especially touching when they, send us a message or a post about, their life before.
Yes.
And how their lives completely changed with, your teachings and
Yes.
How I help them as well on
Yes.
Ascension. And
So it's one of the greatest joys is seeing the value you bring to people out there. And I'd say it's time we spread this across the entire world. Let's work toward that goal. Deal?
Oh, yeah.
All right. All right, buddy.
Okay. Why do people get in that situation in the first place where, they get in that routine rut? I mean, where does that shift happen where the fire in somebody dies?
Well, first, Wallace, remember, we live in an anti-civilization. So the world I write about in Super Puzzle is the Neo-Think world. It's the 12 Visions world. My readers will understand what I'm saying there. So that is like a beautiful, beautiful painting. But it's not what we experience today. It's what we will experience tomorrow. If what we are doing is successful in the end, what I wrote in Super Puzzle is the beautiful world we will experience in the future, but it's not the world we live in right now. And that's important to realize that so people don't feel undue pressure on themselves when they're not like the characters I develop in Super Puzzle, when they're not living at that level. The 12 students that grow up and who they become, and the teacher, Miss Annabelle, and her husband, Mr. Melbourne. When they are not living at that level, they should never feel that they somehow are defaulting or not exerting the discipline, thought, and control that they should, because we are held back by, yes, you got it, we're held back by the ruling class suppressing us. And that all links back to our last podcast talking about the following mode and how we grow up in the following mode and we don't move beyond that. So our minds are imprisoned in the following mode for pretty much our entire lives. And what I'm doing with bringing people to their Friday night essence and giving them the techniques through the many days to pull out of the stagnant routine rut up into their Friday night essence, into their life's ambition. This is a way of breaking them out of that bicameral-like following mode that we're all imprisoned in. So we have to, in a sense, forgive people for being stuck in those. I don't hold it against anyone. We're up against the entire political class in this world. We're yes, pushing things down, pushing us down, suppressing us. We're taxed and we're supporting their glory and power, and at our expense. So that's another whole topic we'll talk about another day. That's getting in the whole political world. But when you ask me, how do they get in that stagnant rut to begin with? My answer to you is it's the following mode. It's the old mentality that we must move beyond, and we must move into the Neo-Think mentality. The human mind is not meant to be in the following mode. That was for the bicameral mentality 3,000 years ago. Remember when we were born, this is how we were introduced and woke up our conscious mind. It was through mimicked reactions, learned mimic reactions. We'd follow our parents, what they did. We'd follow our older siblings, what they did. Then we would follow the world around us. And we never moved beyond that following mode. It's a link all the way back to the bicameral civilizations 3,000 years ago. We're stuck in the following mode. A few people break free. I've said Steve Jobs. I've said Elon Musk. These people broke the chain. They broke out of the following mode into a new mentality, the new mentality called the Neo-Think mentality, where they are not just looking for external voices and external authorities and following what the narrative is, what the media tells us, what the big tech tells us, what the CDC tells us, what our doctors tell us, what our clergy tells us, what our friends and the crowd tells us, and what professors and teachers tell us. No, we learn how to integrate and build puzzles in our own head, puzzles snap together, logic and puzzle pieces, to see the world ourselves the way it really is, see what is, see reality. That is a process of breaking free of the following mode. I offer in my writings Neothink. On my YouTube channel, I have a course called the Neothink Mentality Course. It helps you break out of the following mode in life. This is how you get free of these stagnation ruts. You break free and you throw on top of that your Friday night essence, downstream focus, and man, you're off to the races, buddy. It's a great life. It's a great life. I'm a testament to that. It's a great life.
And I should mention, if somebody wants to learn more about the Mini Days and Power Thinking System and really go step by step and really 10x their productivity and more, then we have a course for that on our website. Although actually I think right now it's still private, exclusive to our own members, but sometime in the future we'll release that. And that's on our website, neothink.com, neothink.com. And I would say while you're there, sign up for the Mark Hamilton newsletter. You'll get updates with everything, and he likes to reveal a lot of his secrets in the newsletter.
And it's free. It's FREE, free.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Shameless plug.
Great.
Okay. Well, I feel like that ends today. I got some chicken and couscous and hummus ready for dinner.
Salivate. And I have to go do another podcast, and you're making me salivate through my next podcast. Dang, Wallace. That was great. I really enjoyed it.